Welcome to another episode of Behind the Dreamers. I'm Jennifer Loading, and we are talking to the achievers, the creators, the magic makers, and the dreamers. These are our friends. These are your friends, and they are living the extraordinary. Well, here we are today with another awesome guest on the show. I'm super excited to welcome him on. But before we do that, I'm just going to give you a little snippet of him, and then we got to get our sponsors recognized, and we're going to jump into this. So my guest today says that after his rock bottom moment, he went all in on holistic self-improvement. He was determined to overcome anxiety and his depression to live a life he'd always dreamed of. He believes in a heart-driven, I love this, but no BS approach to holistic self-improvement and teaching others how to get to the next level of their lives. So we're going to bring him on in just a few minutes, but I do want to give a shout out to our sponsors because we so appreciate them. So today's episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Photography. If you are a creator needing post-production, consultation, or promotion, Walt Mills is your guy. Whether short films, YouTube films, photography work, or a new headshot, he can help you find a solution to match your needs. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to photosbywalt.com. We also want to give a shout out to our friend Chris Clow of Upbeat Media Production. If you are in need of special turnkey event production, Clow is your go-to. To learn more about him and his work, you want to go to upbeatmediapro.com. All right. So as you guys can see, I've got a guest here today, super excited about him and what he's doing. Kevin Palmieri is the CFO, founder, and co-host of Next Level University, a global top 100 self-improvement podcast with more than 1,200 episodes. I'm like, wow, kudos to you. Reaching over 700,000 people in more than 140 countries. Oh my God. Is that right? Did I have that right? Wow.
You do, yes.
Wow. Congratulations, Kevin, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the wonderful introduction. My goal is always to uphold the value that is suggested from the bio. So I appreciate it, and thank you so much for the kind words.
Don't you love those bios? It's always fun to hear about yourself, isn't it?
It is. It's very interesting because I think a lot of people reverse engineer it, and I never planned this at the very beginning. So I'm very grateful for where we've landed because, again, at one point this was just my dream. So I'm very excited.
Yeah. I always tell people that's my favorite part is really when I go through to do these podcasts is kind of going back and learning their backgrounds and sort of dissecting them a little bit and really looking at, okay, who's this individual? Where did they come from? What are they doing? How did they get there? Because that's the stuff that I think we don't praise enough, right? Like we don't glamorize enough these overcoming journeys and these behind the scenes. I think everybody sort of thinks we're just kind of came out of the womb and arrived. Like it just happened, right? And you and I both know that's never the case. There's always a story. There's always work that has to be done in the background. So I'm really excited to, jump in with you and hear your story and what you're doing and how you're making a difference in your world and everybody else's lives. So I think what I want to do is kind of open this up and talk about this rock bottom moment, because I think this is a pivotal point for you. And so let's maybe start there. Tell us a little bit about what this inspiration was to get you to this next step.
Yeah. So I always start my story with just a simple contextual piece. I was raised in a household by my mom and my grandmother. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. And obviously that plays some role. Do I know exactly the role? Not necessarily, but it has definitely played a role in my life. So when I was young, Jennifer, I never knew what I wanted to do, but I did know I didn't want to go to college. That's something I knew for a long time. I don't know how I knew, but I said, look, I am not an intellectual. School, I don't like it. Last thing I'm going to do is 4 more years of it. So after high school, all my friends went away to college. I stayed back and I just worked a bunch of odd jobs. And I pumped gas. I was a personal trainer. I was a truck driver, forklift operator. I was many, many, many different things. But I got this very unique job opportunity in an industry called weatherization. All that means is we go into buildings and make them more energy efficient. That's it. That's the simplest way to put it. Since I worked for a company that worked on state contracts, I was getting anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour. And as somebody who didn't go to college and did not have high expectations for their life, that's a really, really good income. So if you saw me when I was 25 years old, you would see a young man who had a high paying job. I had a new sports car. I had a girlfriend who was a model. I had the body of my dreams because I had just won a bodybuilding show. So I quite literally I had a new place to live. I had all of it. I had everything you could ever want. But internally, I was not a very happy, fulfilled, purpose-driven human being. And I was very anxious. I was very insecure. I was depressed. One day, my girlfriend came to me, and my girlfriend was very ambitious. She said, Kevin, I want to move from the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast, and I want to chase my dreams. I gave her every reason in the world, Jennifer, why she shouldn't do it. I'm sure you can guess how that conversation went, and I'm sure you can guess how that relationship went. So she ended up leaving me, as she should have, and she went on to chase her dreams. But I was so scarce and so insecure that I couldn't support her in that. I was so afraid for myself that I was afraid for everybody else too. So I was not being a great partner. When she left, that's when I started my journey of self-awareness. And it started by asking myself a simple question. If you don't love Kevin, how can anybody else love Kevin? And that was where I started. Here's the problem. I dipped my toe into self-improvement, but I said, you know what? This is the problem. I need to make more money. That's what it is. More money, less problems. So my girlfriend left me at the end of the year. That next year, I said, this is going to be the year where I make the most money I've ever made in my entire life. I got a promotion that year to a foreman at the company that I work for. And if you fast forward to the end of the year, I had spent almost the entire year on the road. So I spent 10 months out of the 12 months living in hotels, driving up and down the East Coast of the United States because most of our contracts were in other states. Final pay stub in hand, standing at my kitchen table. My ex-girlfriend took the chairs. I was never home, so I never bought new chairs. It didn't matter. And I opened it up and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. I had another one of those moments where I realized how much emphasis I put into external stuff, and I thought that was going to fix my internal voids. In that moment, I realized that for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously. The opposite of that is hyperconscious. 3 or 4 months later, I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And that's where all this really started for me. I quite literally fell out of love with my job because I knew I didn't want to do what it took to make that money again. I fell in love with podcasting because who doesn't love podcasting? So I slowly start to call out of work. I slowly start to show up late to the job site. I'm leaving the job site early. And it just kept getting worse where I knew there was an end date on this and I knew I did not want to do this anymore, but I felt stuck. I felt trapped. I didn't know what to do. And it kept getting worse and worse. I was staying up for days on end. I woke up in a hotel room in New Jersey and my alarm went off at 5:15. I sat up. I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots. I'd done this 1,000 times, but that morning it was different. It felt like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And one was saying, you're stuck here forever. I know you want to leave, but you will never make this amount of money again. That would be a terrible decision. If you do work up the courage to leave, what are your friends going to say? You make more money than any of your friends. What are they going to say? What's your family going to say? Your family is so proud of you. You make more money than anybody in your family. And this was the loudest one for me, Jennifer. If you do leave, do you think you're going to ride this podcast thing off into the sunset? Is that really what we're going to do? That is our fallback plan. That's what we're going to do. And in that moment, I felt that if I was to take my life, I would take my problems with me. Now, one of the things I always talk about is the importance of the people around you. I messaged who was just a friend at the time, who's now the CEO of our company, Alan. And I said, hey, Alan, I'm really struggling, man. I'm having these dark thoughts. I'm having these weird feelings, these weird emotions. I don't know what to do, man. What do I do? And in his wisdom, he said, Kev, for the last couple of years, you've really raised your self-awareness and you know yourself at a deeper level. The problem is your environments haven't changed. I think it might be time for you to change your environment. So 3 or 4 months later, I ended up leaving that job and then becoming a very broke entrepreneur, a very broke podcaster, trying to figure out how to do all this. And I think that was 2018. So I've been a full-time entrepreneur now for 5 years almost, which is wild.
Wow. Wow. Good for you, Kevin. You know what's so interesting with this is I hear these stories all the time. And I always tell people, everybody that's been following me for any period of time knows I have my own story and they've heard little bits and pieces of it in the podcast dripped in different places. But, you know, I think it is. We have these moments where we really, it's hard to make those decisions because you get stuck in this, okay, do I stay the same or do I move on? And if certainty is a very high human need for you, right? Like, I'm
Mhm.
sure you're familiar with Tony Robbins' 6 Human Needs. I love talking. I'm actually creating a program right now that's part of some of the stuff I'm talking about. But if security is really high on the need, right, we will stay in toxic situations because that's security to us, right? This is why people stay in bad relationships. People don't leave jobs that don't work for them, right? It's that whole moving from, we have that security to this unknown. But, one of the things I think is so great is once you release that, right? Like, even if you don't even know what's going to happen, once you release that and you get out of that toxicity and you move into a space where you can clear yourself now and become more mindful and self-aware and all those words we want to use, conscious and all that, right? It's so freeing. It's so liberating, right? It really puts you in a space where you can be free now to be who you are. And you've made the decision. So now it's like, what do you do with this decision? Taking it forward. Where do you go from there, right? Which is what you've done. And so I want to applaud you for that. Incredible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. Again, everybody has a story, right? I mean, I think the difference is many of us use our adversity as an advantage, and some other people haven't figured that out yet. They haven't figured out how to do that. And again, nothing against that. I think sometimes it takes a different lesson, or it takes a different experience, or maybe a different trauma, unfortunately. But we all have a story and we all have adversity. It just depends on what do you do with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point on that, some are stubborn, I joke about this because I'm, like I just mentioned a minute ago, I'm building out this program. And it's funny because I've been in the entrepreneur space now since 1999. I've been an entrepreneur for a very long time. I've had a lot of hitting the wall, a lot of it. And, I joke because I had this big crumbling rock bottom moment between 2012 and 2015. It was when I was diagnosed with a disorder that basically ruined my life. But what's so interesting is that I had all these little adversity things that had come along the way, and, I'd get through them and bounce back. And then I had this massive thing that came up. It was telling me all the same things all the other adversity had done. It just had to be this massive thing that said, knocks you on the head sometimes and says, hey, stop being stubborn. Pay attention. Pay attention. Our patterns of behavior, they continue to play out over and over and over. And until we start becoming mindful of the way we're thinking and how that's transferring into how we're behaving, right? Hello, nothing changes, right? So you even talked about that even when you left the job, like when you changed your surrounding, right? Like figured out, hey, it's not my surrounding hasn't changed, or my circle of influence, the people I'm around hasn't changed. So good for you on that. So tell us a little bit about this podcast, because it's booming. Tell us about it.
It's honestly, at the end of the day, we have a belief that holistic self-improvement is something that just isn't out there that much. Like, there's a lot of people that are screaming at you to do better, but they don't really talk about relationships, or they don't talk about self-love or self-worth. So for us, it's leveling up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. And we want to do it holistically, and we do it to the best of our ability by example. That's why we do an episode every day. We do 7 episodes a week, because if I tell you you can get better every day, I better be in your pocket every day. That's a responsibility I do not take very lightly. So for us, it's self-improvement in your pocket every single day from anywhere on the planet, completely free. That is the way we've built our business. That's the way we've built our brand. And we have the best community in the world. And they're just respectful human beings who want better out of life. And I am guessing you have a very similar community as well. And that's why, it's a wonderful thing. So yeah, that's the podcast in a nutshell. I'm very blessed. I'm very grateful. Again, this was a dream. This was a dream for me. So that's why I try to bring the energy and the positivity, because there are far worse places to be than this.
I agree. Well, and you were giving me chills when you were talking about it. It's like, and I bring people on. I will say, when you're giving me chills, you're probably talking my language. You're probably speaking to me. So to your point on the holistic, yes, I believe in that 100%. My videographer always laughs at me because I say 100%. It's like my word, either that or super awesome or super thrilled. But holistic, yes, because I think there's so much talk about this existential stuff. Like, okay, so we learn an affirmation, or we learn how to do a mantra, or we learned how to do this one thing, but we don't talk about, like, think about it even in business. I was just talking about this yesterday. We learn a new widget. We can learn I was in the network marketing space for 23 years. So talk about selling, booking, all those things that we have to do in a business, right? You can learn a script on how to sell. You can learn a widget on how to do this. You can learn how to market. You can learn how to do these things. But if you don't know how to have a conversation and how to read your people and how to know when to back off and when to push forward, just healthy, and how to also walk away without being offended if they don't want your product, what you have to offer. These are all skills we have to learn, right? And it comes from holistically learning how to be confident in who you are, right? Like not looking at the other person. So when I'm talking to you, Kevin, it's not about me. It's about how is what I'm bringing to you going to add value to you? Because if what I have doesn't even add value to you, why would I force you into something that you don't need, right? It's learning about you and your needs. And I think that this gets back to how do we teach people how to be great at the core, like internally out, and then everything flows. I always talk about everything flows more freely in our lives when we take care of the inside,
100%.
So
I'm going to say it now too. 100% super awesome.
That's right. I think I think you guys are speaking my language, and I like it because holistic is what I use. I say holistic. Everything I do, it's not about being an entrepreneur. It's about being the best human entrepreneur that you are, because you cannot teach people to go where you will not go, and everything rises and falls on leadership. John Maxwell, my favorite mentor, everything. Yeah. So bam.
And at the end of the day, it's like, and being an entrepreneur is hard. Yes, I 100%. Building a business is hard. It's even harder doing it in alignment with the person that you want to be. And that's why it's so challenging to be holistic, to be well-rounded. I think the problem, Jennifer, for a lot of people is when you listen to a podcast or you read a book, especially on social media, it's very blanket statement. There's two frames. No one cares, work harder, or everything that's supposed to happen will happen. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think if you're burning down, you should probably work a little less and then create a more sustainable runway. If you're not getting any results because you're expecting certain results, maybe the opportunity for more aligned work is there. What a lot of people aren't understanding is the true changes that happen for human beings happen at the identity level. That's like the self-awareness. That's the limiting beliefs. A lot of us don't make enough money because we have an aversion to money. A lot of us aren't successful because we're afraid of success. And we think, if I'm successful, I will leave people behind. If I'm successful, all the skeletons in my closet will come out. That's actually stopping us. So we try to dig into that deeper stuff that you really have to unlock. The internal unlocks the external for most of us. Many of us think the external, including myself in the past, will unlock the internal. And unfortunately, it's set up the other way, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I call those things the paradigms and the limiting beliefs, right? They manifest very differently. I talk about that a lot, especially with money, with women. And a lot of that, I even use my example because when I was growing up, my parents were entrepreneurs. And so I kind of grew up in that entrepreneur spirit. But I always kind of joke about how we sort of lived this like feast or famine mindset, like we either had things or we didn't. And so when you think about how that translates later on, I use this loosely and say, I had a very worked kind of idea about money, meaning that I didn't know if I was going to have it. So I was afraid to get it because was I going to be able to keep it if I did get it? Right. And so those beliefs would actually manifest very differently or very different in the different areas of my life. So where they might be frugal spending in my personal life, it might be that I'm being massively risk averse in my business life and didn't want to invest and do anything because I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep it. So you're very right when you talk about these, however you want to call it, these beliefs that come up, and it isn't internal. And then I think until people work through that garbage, whatever you want to call it, it will show up, and we fill it with voids. We fill it with cars and more money and all those things that we think are, relationships. I think that we think are going to make us happy. So you touched on some good stuff there. I love it. I love it. I do want to ask you this question because I was reading through some of your notes and the things you talk about. I like this vulnerability thing. And I'm sensing that you're very authentic in what you do. And you said that really already when you said that you do your podcast every day because you can't show, you can't preach what you're not showing, right? Like we have to lead by example. So maybe tap into a little bit on this vulnerability thing, because I think this was a really hard one, even for me, really going into this, because we don't want to be vulnerable, right? Like that's a scary thing. But how is that? Why is that important?
I mean, in your everyday life, the level of vulnerability you have in your relationships is directly correlated to the quality of your relationships. I believe that at such a deep level. I was on a business trip with Alan, my business partner, and we were getting ready to watch this movie. We used to watch it. It's called Superbad. I don't know if you've ever seen Superbad.
Yes.
But we we used to watch it back in like high school days, right? And we quote it, and it was our favorite movie. So we ordered tacos. We sat down. We're going to watch Superbad. We watched the first 45 minutes. I was uncomfortable as hell. The vibes are a little too low for me. I'm trying to be a more character-driven man, and it made me feel really dirty. But I didn't say anything. The next day, we order tacos again. We get ready to sit down and watch Superbad. And I said, hey, Alan, can I talk to you about something, man? He's like, yeah, of course, brother. What's up? I said, I can't watch this. I can't do this. I feel dirty, man. I feel bad. I feel dirty. I feel sick. I can't watch this. And he's like, dude, same. I feel exactly the same. I can't do this. So we watched Meet the Parents, and we ate tacos, and we rejoiced. The point of that story is not to poop on Superbad. Again, it serves a purpose. But because I was able to communicate my truth with Alan vulnerably, now we know each other at an even deeper level. Now I have proof that I am safe to communicate those things with him. Our relationship is way better. I would say the people that I have the most impactful, positive relationships with are the people who know me at the deepest level. They know Kevin. They know the real Kevin behind the scenes, when he's sad, when he's happy, when he's struggling, when he's not. Vulnerability is an unlock. And it also helps you have real, aligned, authentic relationships. If you can't be yourself around your people, who are you going to be? And even deeper, if you want to find your people, you have to be yourself. And I know that's a challenge. So I always suggest that you find somebody that you trust closest to you, and you start with a level 1 share. What seems like it's a little bit scary to share? Cool. Do that. You don't have to tell somebody your deepest, darkest fear. You don't have to do that. Another thing and an important understanding is you can really only be as vulnerable with others as you are with yourself. So a lot of us, unfortunately, we dilute ourselves into thinking we are a certain way, but we're not vulnerable enough to look into the proverbial mirror. So that's another reason why self-awareness and just ownership of self is so important. I can't be vulnerable on this podcast if I'm not vulnerable with myself. I know some of my biggest shortcomings. I know many of my biggest weaknesses. That allows me to try to show up here authentically because at least I'm already aware of them and I can talk about them openly, right? And I think that's an important thing. So if you want to connect with somebody, the best way to connect is through relatability. And relatability usually requires vulnerability.
Yeah, that's good. Like it, Kevin. Good stuff.
Thank you.
I want to
get me fired up.
Yeah, I know. This is me every time I get on the podcast. You know, I feel like it's so funny. I'll tell you this, and I think it's great because a lot of people know this. But, you know, here in Dallas, we have such great networking opportunities. I mean, you could probably find a live networking event almost every single day of the week. And it's so funny because I have been doing so many podcast episodes that I have been doing all my great people networking through podcasting, meaning that I'm engaging in great conversations. By the time I'm done, my cup is filled. I'm finished. I don't need to go network. I'm just done.
I know the feelings. Trust me very well.
That's why I love podcasting, because we get to, one of the beauties of this is we get to share and inspire, right? But we also get to engage in great conversation. How can you have a bad day when you have great conversation?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
It's so true. And it carries over to, I did a podcast pre-call with somebody earlier and they were nervous because they were a new podcaster. And I said, I want you to think about this. If you do 50 episodes, if you do 100 episodes, starting a conversation with the bank teller or a waiter or a waitress or the barista is easy. If you can start a conversation with a stranger over the internet, you can ask for another pump of whatever in your coffee. It's not that hard. So that's another beautiful thing about putting yourself out there, is you become more confident when you practice it.
Yeah. I will say this. This podcast was a rebrand in January, but I think I did about 150 episodes on my old show. So I have talked to I have talked to so many incredible people. I have so many stories. It's like, I could totally be on a show and be like, hey, there was a person on my podcast. I remember this story about this person. Like, I just have so many stories about people, but I, aside from that, have learned so many great skills from talking to other people. Just so many things I have learned, and even just about professions and careers I didn't even know about, just, different things. And so you can't go wrong in doing this. And you are so right. I think if you can do that many episodes, you can pretty much do everything else, after that. You're pretty vulnerable when you do a podcast, right?
Yeah. It definitely gets easier as you go.
I agree. So, fun question. What do you feel like you've learned in this journey about yourself?
When I first started this journey, I remember somebody suggested a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm sure you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's a classic. I remember thinking, Jennifer, what is the point of me learning? I don't get it. Like, what am I going to take from this book that is going to affect my life? I learned in the very beginning that I had a very fixed mindset, unreasonably fixed, because I didn't know there was any other way to think. So, number one, I really have had the opportunity to practice a growth mindset. I mean, I've had 1,200 opportunities to mess up, and I've messed up in every single one. And I'll mess up in here in this interview in some way, shape, or form. I'll say something that I don't want to say in the way I say it. It's just par for the course. That the understanding that the more you fail, the more you succeed. I think that's what I've learned. I mean, I've just had more opportunities to fail than most people. That's why I'm quote unquote successful. That's one of the big things for sure. The other thing, and it's kind of a painful thing, the people that you want to grow don't always grow. Or the people that you come up with aren't necessarily trying to go to the same place as you are. So I've had a lot of relationships that I used to have that I don't have anymore. And it's been painful, and I still get sad about it, even though I'm relatively stoic when it comes to that. But it's been a challenge, and it's been very interesting to see people that we were growing at similar rates. They stopped growing. People who I didn't expect to grow quickly are growing faster than some other people. It's given me a lot of perspective, but it's also given me a lot of understanding that this is one of the reasons people don't want to grow, because the relationship aspect of it, your family, your friends, your coworkers, they don't understand you. There's a lot of conflict and resistance when you grow. I did not expect that. I did not expect that at all. And I have seen that every day in every client, every team member, myself, Alan. It's been a very interesting, enlightening piece for me.
That's good. Well, and I think that goes along, with that saying where they say, as you climb, it gets lonelier at the top. And I would agree with you on that, because I was just having this conversation not too long ago with somebody about relationships that I had and how some of them have evolved in positive ways, like they've moved because those people are continuing to grow as well. But then some of them, they're just different. And I can't, there may have been people that I had more association with before that I've not necessarily severed the ties, but I'm just not around them near as much because I'm evolving in a different way. And I think that's also, like when we're doing coaches and stuff, because I coach people and I always tell them, at some point I would expect that you would outgrow me. Like you would need more, because I may not be at the level and maybe you're moving faster than I am. Now, I don't intend to ever stop growing because I probably, your mind's probably like mine. I have opened up the floodgates. I feel like that when you just stop growing, you just put yourself in a box and put a lid on it, Yeah. So I don't foresee myself not continuing to grow in some capacity, but I do think that, what you said is so important, because I do think we have to be aware that, yes, those relationships do evolve and some go with us and some go different directions. And, but I think the beauty of that, Kevin, is that you also form new ones and you find the people that are supposed to be in your circle that are growing like you're growing. And those are the people that you hang on to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And it's a brave thing. It's a brave thing. You and I are recording this around the holiday season. One of the reasons the holiday season is so challenging for so many of us is we go back into old environments with old expectations. People remember you for who you used to be, not who you are. And I mean this with love, a lot of people are who they used to be still. And that's okay, right? That's their choice. That's their prerogative. But they expect you to be there too. And that's where things get weird, because you have the opportunity to revert and pretend you're the old version of you. And that's where things get really, really messy. So if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling the conflict, if you're feeling the resistance, it's most likely because there's contrast. And oftentimes we don't know what to do with the contrast. Whether you're the partner or the person who's been outgrown or vice versa, contrast is challenging and it's awkward. And that's where things get a little bit weird.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And it is always because you get in that position of, I always joke and say that, when I get into those positions, I'm like, I don't like the person that I am right now because this is not the person that I am. Because you revert back into old patterns, and for those of us that I feel like are self-aware, we do pay attention. It's disturbing because you'll be like, I'm doing that. Just stop. Just, I've learned that when I get into those, sometimes in those situations, I just have to say, you know what? I'm pausing. I'm not engaging in this. Time out. time out because I need to go regroup. I need to take off.
Yep.
But
Yeah,
it is
makes
hard.
sense.
It's hard.
Yeah, it is. Relationships are hard.
Yeah.
Relationships are hard. And especially when you factor in growth. Nobody taught us that. I mean, what class did you take that taught you when you grow, your relationships get strained? And I never learned that before. So it's been quite an interesting part of the journey. I'm blessed because I have very supportive people in my life, and I hear a lot of nightmare stories about the way other people are treated. I'm blessed that I don't deal with that, but I also think I kind of set it up that way from the beginning too. I have a very small circle for a reason.
Yeah. Well, good for you. And that's important. I agree with you. It's better to have the small and the right people than to have a bunch that are not, because nobody wants to be around that. So you're doing the right thing. You should give yourself a pat on the back for that. That's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
There was a question I was going to, I know what I wanted to ask you. Where do you see all this going? You're doing great on the podcast. Any other future, like something different coming in the works? Or are we just kind of growing and staying in this zone?
Yeah. So we are in the process of developing some technology. So we will have some technology that rolls out fairly soon. I mean, there's a lot going on with AI, so we're going to be a part of that with habits and habit tracking and productivity. But honestly, for us, it's going to be the same, just get better. How do we get a little bit better every single day? And we're going to be doing more live events and more stuff like that. But no, we have built so much and so quickly that now we have to just ratchet it in, and we have to just get to doing the stuff that we have really set up. So more of the same, just hopefully and intentionally better.
I like it. And sometimes you need to do that. I think there's a time for that. I still think you're growing even when you're doing that, because you're growing at being better. We're all still continually growing, right? But I think sometimes it's about moving into something, and then it's about sitting back and how do we perfect what we got? Like I'm in a building phase right now because I'm trying to build this thing, and I swear, Kevin, I'm like, that thing's gonna be the death of me. Like I'm just when you're building something, and I feel like I'm on this timeline, but it's like I want it to be a certain way and I want it to be good, and and I have to think about, if I were going to pay for this, what would this look like, and what do my clients need? And so I'm just like, when I get this thing done, I'm just going to be like that. I mean, like, let's just figure out how we're going to get things better for a while, So
yeah,
I'm
I know
with
the
you.
feels. Yeah.
I'm with you. What last question I want to ask you, and then I want to do some fun questions with you. But what advice would you give to somebody? Maybe they're at that place where they're trying to make that decision to do different, to go. Maybe it is entrepreneurship, or maybe it's just that big next, that next big leap.
I would say get crystal clear and very familiar with what the mud is. This is all I mean. I think a lot of us assume we're going to jump from dead grass of something that's no longer serving us to lush green grass to the life of our dreams. And that just is not realistic. There is mud in between. You just don't know what the mud is. So for me, yes, I left my job and I went all in chasing my dreams. My mud was being $35,000 in credit card debt, not being able to fix my car when it broke down, not being able to buy Christmas presents for my girlfriend, asking her to pay rent. That was my mud. Your mud might be, you know what? I have to put another year and a half in at this job. Well, I moonlight as a photographer or a podcaster or a speaker or a coach, whatever it is. Maybe that's your mud. I think a lot of us, we overcomplicate the process because we think the grass isn't greener yet. The grass isn't greener yet. I'm going to hop when it's green. The grass will not be green until you water it and work on it long enough. And it's this weird paradox, but that would be the advice, is get insider information on what the mud entails. Ask somebody who's done what you want to do and say, hey, I've heard about all the good stuff. Tell me about the ugly stuff. Like, what does it take to actually get to where you are? Hopefully they'll tell you the truth. Hopefully they didn't get lucky and they can actually reverse engineer it. But yeah, I think if we have an understanding and an aligned expectation, we're probably more likely to win. If we don't have expectations that are aligned with reality, it's really hard to win that game.
Yeah, I like your metaphor with the mud. That's great. Haven't heard it quite put that way. And I've heard this kind of messaging, but not like that. I like that. I think metaphors are good. And I think, being realistic, I think is what I feel like that's what you're getting at, is being really realistic as to what you're getting into, and also I think the way I put it is expecting that there's going to be crap. There's going to be stuff that's going to happen, right? Like expecting that, and I think so many, I don't know about you, but I feel like, cause I when I was in the network marketing space, I worked with people coming into the business a lot. And I feel like a lot of them would come in, and I kind of joke about this, that they would feel like this is going to be a rainbows and unicorns kind of thing. And I'm pretty practical when it comes to stuff. I know you're going to work. This is a business. If you want it to be a hobby, I guess it's a hobby, but if you want to do anything real in life, you're going to get in some mud. Like you're going to have to get dirty, right? You're going to have to do something. And I think there's this false idea sometimes that people go in and they have this really, I think to give them credit, I think they just really have their dreamers, right? Because I'm a dreamer, and they have this high idea that, oh, this is exciting and I'm passionate. I'm going to do this, right? But they forget behind all that passion, there's the work ethic. There's all the stuff that comes with it. And there's going to be crap that happens. And so I kind of joke and always say, it's not that I am going to expect not going to question whether or not something's going to come my way that's going to be bad. It's going to be how I'm going to get through it. I expect that. I just automatically assume I'm going to get through it. It's just to what degree? What do I need to do? How bad is it going to be? And what am I going to have to do to get through it? You know what I mean? It changes the dynamics. 100%.
It's important to have the right expectations. I mean, I don't mean this in the way it's going to sound, but I have stopped people from chasing audacious goals because based on understanding them and their core values as a human being, certainty was very high, and they didn't they weren't in it for that. They shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And I had that conversation. What do you value as a human being? Is it important to you that you pick your kid up from the bus every day? Yes. Is it important that you're able to be sustainably, financially stable without worrying? Absolutely. Don't do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Don't do what I'm doing, because it's not going to serve you at the level it's going to serve me. And I don't want you to find that out in 5 years. I'd rather at least give you that awareness now and let you make a decision from that perspective.
I think that's good. And I think it's telling somebody what they need to hear versus what they want to hear. Right. And that's what I think is so important, because I think a lot of times people do that. They don't get what they need to hear. They get what they want to hear. And I'm with you. I would rather tell somebody if something you're doing is not aligning up. And it's funny. I just had this conversation. If individualism is very high on your scale, right? Uncertainty. Like I like uncertainty. I like risk. I think there's adventure in that. Like, the more the better. If that is not high on your scale, then you jumping ship and quitting your corporate job and saying, I'm going to go do this tomorrow without weighing any risk out and getting some things set up in place and having some kind of comfortability over here, either some other source of income or something here that's going to help float you till you get that, might not be the best idea right now. So I'm all for chasing dreams, but I agree with you. There has to be some, whatever I want to say, practicality. Is that a word? Like some practicalness to this, right? Because we do have to think these things through, or you just go in and make a lot of roadblocks or hit a lot of roadblocks. And if you stick around long enough, I think you'll figure it out. You either quit or you'll figure it out.
Those are the two options.
Right. Some of us stick around a long time. That's why I say, if you're stubborn, some of you stick around for a while and you'll just keep hitting the roadblocks. And eventually the one will hit you dead smack in the face. And you'll be like, okay, stupid, how many times am I going to have to hit you before you don't do that again?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It's good. Yep. Good stuff, Kevin. Good stuff. All right. Well, this has been fun. I want to ask you a couple fun questions. This is always not that all this other stuff hasn't been good, but I like to do these rapid fire because I just think they're fun, and it kind of turns us back on that authentic, vulnerable side of things and shows everybody.
Okay, I'm in.
We're all human, right? Okay. So fun question. What's the first concert you ever attended?
First concert I ever attended, Nickelback, Breaking Benjamin, and 3 Days Grace. It was a jam. I don't know what, maybe 2007, maybe. Like this was prime. So that was a really good one.
Okay, very cool. Have not seen any of those. I'm probably a little older than you. So those, I tell everybody when I get asked that question, my very first concert I ever attended was Motley Crue.
Ooh.
And it was back in the late 80s, early 90s. I think I was 17. I was in Houston. That's back when they had the Summit was there. It's now, I think, the Lakewood Church, but I think they played basketball there. I think the Rockets played there. I can't remember, but it was a big arena. And I've actually seen them several times since that time, but that was the first one. So have not seen Nickelback. Haven't seen any of those that you talked about. Know who they are, but
nobody likes Nickelback anymore anyway. So you're not missing much.
It's so funny how people talk about that. That's so funny. All right. Favorite travel destination spot?
Favorite travel destination spot? I would say I've never been to Italy, but I want to go to Italy.
Yeah, I have a friend.
So I would say that.
Yeah, I have a friend that's been there, says it's amazing. So probably a good place to
We
go.
have a team member that lives there, and I've heard really good things. It's just been, I mean, again, there hasn't been a lot of, never mind travel, there hasn't been a lot of off days in the past 6 years. So, but that's on the list. That'll happen for sure.
There you go. I love it. You're claiming it. It'll happen.
Yes.
All right. So when you're not podcasting, when you're not doing all these great things with the podcast, what do you like to do for fun?
So this is where I get caught because so the gym, and you said you love exercise. Exercise to me is really fun. I love heavy weights, and I love kickboxing and martial arts. I love watching martial arts. And then other than that, when I'm done for the day, I just like to turn my brain off because I'm just so tired. So there really isn't. For me, I'll watch the fights on a Saturday night. That is my version of fun, or doing fun, unique experiences with my wife, depending on, hiking, trying new restaurants, trying new tea spots. That's fun.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Totally. And I can really appreciate when you said turn the brain off, because I'm that way too. I am like, after having all these, enlightening conversations and then doing my work, it's like when I sit down, it's like, I don't watch TV very much, but when I do, I just want trash. I want trash. I don't want anything that's going to make my brain think. I don't want to have to get into some movie that's going to have some kind of context to it that I love those movies. Don't get me wrong, but not after I've been going all day, because then my brain is just tired. So I can appreciate everything you said there. Okay. Last fun question I want to ask you. This is my favorite question. It's so cheesy. What's in your Amazon cart right now?
Nothing.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, no. If anything, I mean, I don't put anything in my cart unless I'm going to buy it that day.
I like it.
That's it. Yeah, no. For me, I'm a pull the trigger. If I'm not going to do it today, I'm not going to put it in there, because the other thing is, I know what I need. Right? I don't need to be reminded of what I need. So yeah, there's nothing, genuinely nothing in my Amazon cart.
That's so great. You're like, I'm just making the decision. We're either getting it or not. The only reason I do that, Kevin, the only reason I have stuff, I'll tell you two reasons. One, because my son gets into my Amazon cart. That's why. But the other reason is I look at something and then I get sidetracked. And so it's still in there and then I have to go back and do it. But I'm like you, like if I put it in there, I just want to get it done. I don't want to have to go back to it and look at it. Yeah. But I love that question, because I find out some of the funniest things about what people have in their Amazon carts, and every now and then.
What's the best you've heard?
I've had wine. I've had what are they? Wine flutes or champagne flutes or whatever. I'm trying to think. That was probably the funniest one. I was like, "What are you doing with those? Like, you have at a party or something?" But a lot of them will be like books. I get clothing every once in a while. I don't know. I need to go back. We've had some funny ones. I just remember that one because I was like, "What are you doing with those? Like, you must be giving people over." I think in mine it's usually like pet stuff or pet stuff. Or pet stuff. My son's got pets. It's like something's always in there. So, Kevin, this has been so awesome. If our audience wants to find your podcast, learn a little bit more about you, your story, what you're doing, where do we want to send them?
I always just say, listen to the podcast. Just search Next Level University. Everything you need is in the show notes. We're on all the podcast platforms. We're on YouTube. That's the best place to get to know us and figure out if we're for you. I think that's very important. I don't want you to listen if you don't resonate with us. And that's always the point for us.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think if they're listening to mine, they're probably going to like you. I think we're good. Fair. So definitely what we'll do is when we get this ready to go out, I'll make sure that we put, some notes in there to go check you guys out on the podcast and stuff. So it's been great. It's been fun. I'm going to I want to keep up with you and see what you're doing and see, how this all unfolds and what else happens in the, as you keep progressing and growing and moving up.
Thank you.
Do want to say to our listeners, of course, if you enjoy our show, please be sure you give us a rating on iTunes, Facebook. If you get in there, we can't do this without you. Check us out on YouTube. And we want to leave you with a parting thought. I say this every week, Kevin. Same thing. In order to live the extraordinary, you must start, and every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another. We will see you next time.